Okie doke. I think we're all set. Hi. Starting a couple minutes early because yesterday I had some problems with a digital aspect of streaming, and so that was rather a nuisance. And so today I thought, why don't I check in on this early, just a couple minutes, and then that way I know that I have worked out the kinks. So there we go. Everything's working. Ticket-a-boo. So I'm happy, happy, happy. Um, all right. So I've got a couple things to talk about today. I'm in a different place normally than I am in the studio while doing the streams. But one of the things that we've done is set up the camera system differently, set up my desk system differently, set up the lighting system differently, and so happy days. Today's image is of the one-page story for this afternoon. Now, this was suggested on Friday by our good friend Linda, and it was her birthday, so this is her birthday page. And oh, well, there's Linda there. That's okay. So this is Linda's birthday page, and so there we go. So this is about, the suggestion was me teaching 16-year-olds how to fly spaceships. So there it is, and it's posted online. And Linda says, welcome to everyone. Look at that. She's a moderator on the go, and she still stops in and says hi to everyone. You're awesome, Linda. Hi, Linda. Hi, Tim. Hi, everybody else that's joining us. So there's today's page. So this week has been a busy one. And we started off with Canada Land, and this is a page drawn on using blue pencil, a mechanical blue pencil, and then put into the computer, and then, of course, text added to that. And then our second page, which was which was posted yesterday, was drawn in red ballpoint pen, and then added to the computer and text applied to that. Oh, Linda says that turned out great. Thanks, Linda. And then our third page is, of course, Flight School. And so Flight School was drawn utilizing a yellow marker and then adding orange pen to that. And then the final thing applied to it was an ochre marker for the a little bit of contrasting values in there. So that came together pretty fun. So here's what I started doing yesterday, and I'm not going to show you the whole thing. I'm just going to show you the first panel. But this is, I decided to start, I got to get back to drawing digitally. And because of the new page setup, or the new studio setup, I can draw far easier digitally. What it is Lori's letting me try out a standing sitting desk. It sort of raises up and drops down. It sits wherever you want it to be. And so I'm able to work in a different sitting position. The problem with being my height is that I'm often slumped over things, and this way I can raise it to where I need it to be. So there we go. So here we are, and I'm able to work upright. Oh, thanks, Linda. Thanks for posting that. So yeah, so it's fun, and I started doing some digital drawing, and in the course of doing so, I've been playing with tone and value. So here's the page with a slightly darker tone to it, and this is the fun thing about layers and things like Photoshop, is that you can turn your drawing into a transparency. Pick whatever color you want that transparency to be, and then overlay it onto your own drawing if you like. It's to see about changing the tonality of it, like to make it darker if need be, or lighter if need be. So I started playing with that. So there's the original, and this is if I overlay the black line art, and then this one is if I just use the blank line art. And so there's a sort of interesting quality to that, and then I can beef up the black line art. So there's an interesting quality to be able to experiment like that, and very appreciative of that. So I kind of like the blue, and so yeah. So when I look at the blue, all I think of is, what? That's awesome! I can't help myself sometimes. Okay, um, so here's today's page, and so what I thought I'd do is one of the things that a lot of creators do is they use a rather chunky setting on the pen or pencil, and so they use a wider brush. So in this case, like, you know, a thicker line. And so what they're going to do is they're going to rough in the composition. Now, I've shown this before, and I'll show it again. I have sketchbooks that are specifically just drawing comic, like page breakdowns. And so doing so allows me to envision all kinds of ideas that I can then proceed to develop further. Now, what I thought we might try today is to take one of these and you know, stick something together on that. So I thought what I'd do is the first thing I would do first and foremost is to break down some of these panel shapes that I had sort of drawn out on the initial page. Now, the initial page I drew in a portrait format, and so I'm going to switch it over to a landscape as we go here. And I just thought the first thing I'll do is rough out the composition, and then we'll see where we go next with it. So in roughing out the composition, first I'm going to use this layer to make some panel shapes. That's fairly light, so give me a second while I beef that up a little bit. And we'll get that, excuse me a sec, we'll get that darker so people can see what's going on. Hey, what's going on? So here's our darker image, and I'll do it one more time, and then I think I want to switch the color, because this color is dull. So I'm going to switch it to this green. That'll be a little bit easier to see. So the basic shape of this page's layout that I did. Hiya, Jim. Welcome aboard. Is you know, 4 panels, and well, with technically a 5th, but the 5th one is really just a sort of floating image within the page. So we're gonna play with this a little bit and see what we can figure out. So I'm just making these panel shapes. Better do this on its own level since I've already expanded the other. So working from the sketches. We're gonna need a new Jimmy. Jim has said, Christopher, I've fallen into the well. Please, go get the sheriff. Go get Timmy. And that's why I said we're gonna need a new Jimmy. Jimmy's in the well. Timmy, get the rope. Yeah, we're gonna lead a rope down there and get him out. So, all right, if you get a chance, go check out Jim's. Jim's got some YouTube channels going on, and one of them is where he's putting a lot of music out, and it's fantastically fun what he's doing on that. So if you get a moment, check out what he's doing there. So I'm just merging these 2 layers here. So now we've got our border layer, and you know, it's transparent so that I can draw whatever I want underneath it, and you know, it's not going to make much difference to the. It's not going to make any difference to the panels, so that's always nice. Okay, so we've got this started. Now I showed you a few minutes ago the initial sketch that I had for this. So what I'm going to do now with this really chunky brush per se is that I'm just going to sort of, whoops, I'm on the thing, get on the pencil. So I'm just going to rough it in, right? So I'm going to put these I'm working from my own layout. I'm putting these characters and the scenarios into the composition as I had them laid in. I have no real further design than to just sort of get the idea of it down. We're going to refine it on a layer over top of that. So if you're, one of my things has always been sort of drawing and cleaning up as I go along, and we're not doing that this time. So we're just going to allow ourselves the luxury of multiple layers to work from. See, I'm not even worrying about going outside the box right now, because in all honesty, it doesn't matter in the moment. So here's our second character, who's standing above our first, and both are looking back. I think, and this is another beautiful thing about drawing digitally, is that I think I want this person to be a little taller and a little bit wider. So there we go. So now I'm just going to put some perspective lines in from the roof. And again, we're not overly worried about overlapping things and you know, interfering with the way that the characters are assembled on our page, because we're going to clean it up as we go along. So there we go. So we've got some basic form for each of these people. And if I do anything, I might take them and expand them out a little bit. Just give them a little more volume. Just because we can. So the nice thing about this new setup is that it really makes it far more comfortable for me to draw. And I can take my notes and I can now utilize those to, you know, to more readily and easily draw digitally on the page. And that's how I'm able to start really exploring and experimenting and doing stuff like this. So there we go. So this is yesterday's page. It'll be showing tomorrow, by the way. And what we're working on right now is the page that will be showing on Friday. So there's our first page, our first panel, sorry. Okay, so one of the things that I then have to allow myself the ability to do when working from a little sketchbook like that is, what in the world was I drawing in this panel? And sometimes that's kind of fun. It makes us have to, it keeps it fresh, right? It doesn't make us have to be lockstepped into, this is the expectation for this drawing. You've got to make sure everything's drawn to look exactly like this. By hashing it in such a way as it makes me have to think a minute about what I've drawn, it gives me more to explore as I'm working. So here I've got a character holding his doodly-doo, and that hand needs to be bigger, like so. Easy. Again, not worrying about the specific lines. This is just the rough base, right? So we have them standing in front of a partition. One of the things that I'm doing, now you can do all kinds of lines digitally in your thing, but because I'm just sketching and having a ball, my little handy ruler that I have that has all the circular holes in it, because this is actually a ruler for finding out the grade of knitting needles. That's really what this is. But it's a fantastically accessible little ruler to carry around in your pocket. Pocket nerd. And at the same time, to be able to, you know, to use the circles in it and make your quick lines and quick measurements, especially if you're doing little thumbnails and stuff like that. Something like this is ideal. The ruler that I tend to prefer for my large drawings is the one that, you know, has a big gridded pattern on it, and it's 1.5 feet long, and, you know. So, yeah, so let's get back to this. So I've got this person standing up against the wall. So we'll put a second line across to give some shape to the wall. And then we can do this where we have a second wall in the background where what we're going to do next, and I'm just going to jump a layer for this. So I put an extra layer in on the side because now I can draw kind of like a fun explosion that's sort of leaking out into this space. You know, and that's what I have roughly laid out in my original sketch. So now we've got a room where somebody, Sneaky Pete over here, has been up to some mischief over on in that area of the room or of the building. And we can add some materials into to this space as well, or we can have, you know, somebody running out of the smoke, coughing. I mean, that could be something that we could add. Is that here's a person who's, you know, who's coming out of the smoke, and so we'll have his leg disappear into it, and of course we can have some smoke trail off of him, you know. So that's another idea, and if we don't like that, we just remove that little layer that we sketched that on. So happy. So there's that. Now the other thing that I have on this page is that I drew in, I'm going to make a note for myself so I don't accidentally erase a layer. So another thing that I've done is I drew in these three characters. So the second panel isn't actually a panel. It's three individuals. And I think that what I had planned in this story is that here's these two characters going up something like an escalator into sneaking into a place. And there were three characters that, you know, are our assembly, the three characters that we're focusing on. So this third person in the second panel, this one, so there's one, there's two, and there's three, right? So the third one is the one who's up to mischief separate from the first two. And so, you know, what we're going to do is I'm going to draw across this span here. So if I go back into my little note thing, across this span right here, which may well mean that perhaps we need to consider condensing this panel or this image over here in this panel. And so we move over so that we don't lose all of the face. And then we just sit down with our pencil tool and we draw the entirety of their face. So that we'll need to have a little more of their doodad here. That's okay. The reason that I did that is this is going to be part of this is going to be covered up. And so we don't want to lose everything. If you draw completely on top of here, well, what's the point of drawing half of that in the first place? And there's already the challenge. And one of the reasons that I show on Patreon now, here's the page with the text all over it. And I was originally showing pencils and so forth, you know, that led up to it. But now what I'm doing is that I'm showing the finished page without text, without sound effects, without any of that business on it. Just the actual visual aspect of it. Because a lot of it gets covered up by words, right? So there's no point in doing that. So we move this over and give ourselves a little more space to use. Because we know that we're going to put these characters on the foreground. Now, one of the things that I'll do, you all right? Corbin's having a sneeze festival over there. One of the things that I'll do is I will sit down and switch colors as I sketch over top of something. You know, and this is the sort of stuff as I'm doing these one-page stories and so forth, you know, that you see in these. Woo-woo! A little sneak peek of something there. Anyway, so let's draw these characters in. Now I've put a different color on this layer now. So it's a fresh layer. I turn it on and off. Nothing appears and disappears because it's brand new. And what I'll do is I'll take my giant head out of the equation so that you can a little more easily see the page. There we go. So what we've got here is the troublemaker, the third person, setting an explosion down this hallway where somebody's running out of the smoke. All right. M. Young says, draw Jacques cleaning Firepaw. Firepaw is from Warriors books and series of cats. Jacques is a cleaner shrimp from Finding Nemo. And Firepaw is from Warrior books and series of cats. Well, I'm going to screen cap that, so I'll write it in the book after. Christopher figured out he doesn't have to, randomly start writing everything right away. So yeah, so I've screen capped that. So I will add that into do a page, something related to that. So here we are in a new layer, and we're going to put in these new characters now. So I'm just going to rough them in as I have them in my notes. And I was kind of having an awful lot of fun with the way that they're dressed, putting them in some rather random outfits. So I'm just roughing in their shape, not worrying about all their details. And we'll come together with those details a little more as we go along. I'm going to raise that shoulder up. But again, this is just plotting them in where they're going to be on the onset page. So here's our second person. A little bit of an overlap between these two. And so one of the things I'm trying to do here, I'm having them stand different ways. If you have everybody with the exact same stance, it becomes a little less characteristic of each person. It becomes a little homogenized, and so you don't get the sense that these are different characters in your story. If everybody all stands in the same pose with their hands on their hips and they're, hey, look at me, I'm the same as this guy, and everybody has standard, superhero pose, or a guy in business suit with arms at his sides, not as exciting. So I'm putting the third person in now. I've given each of them different outfits. This one's got a collar up. This one doesn't have the collar, right? We've got a longer, more triangular shaped outfit. This one's got far more angles to what's going on with them. And our third person has got far more leg revealed of the three of them. So, and again, their feet are doing different things. So that we know that if this person, the third one that I'm sketching in now, I'll go over something in a second. Just let me switch the layers. Okay, so this person, and this is on our note layer. So our third person, their weight is on this leg and this hip. Our second person is sort of standing where they're leaning forward a little bit. And our third person is standing with their legs spaced out a little bit, so they've got more of a solid stance here. So there's just sort of different directions going on for these guys. What have I put on what layer? There we go. Okay, so I'll just erase those out. And we'll get back to sketching out the whole thing. I drew on the wrong layer when I was making my note there. Good job, Chris. Anyways, so there's our first couple of panels laid out on the top of our page. Jim asked, Chris, looking back now, are you glad you switched to Amazon Print on Demand? That's a cool question, Jim. Thank you. I am. I am indeed. There's real benefit to being able to have, what I'm doing accessible to people, that I'm reaching while doing this stuff online. I'm reaching people around the world at different times of the day and so forth. And for them to be able to access the stuff that they're making contributions to, so that they can see their, if they've made a suggestion, and I've drawn it. I'm just going to randomly open up. So if I've drawn it in, why don't I turn the camera back on? That's a good question, Chris. Wrong camera. There we go. So as I've drawn stuff, based on their suggestions and put them in the book, they can now have access to that, so they can, look at the result and have a copy of the result that they're partially involved in. So that's kind of nice, and it's also kind of nice to be able to. There's a lot of rigmarole and real specificity about putting the pages together, but it's really nice to be able to put that process together, and then not have to carry X amount of stock in the house and X amount of and do the distribution stuff and a lot of monkeying around. Now there is still some stuff I have to send out, and there is still some things that I have to allocate myself, but nowhere near on the level that I did as an independent publisher on a regional basis. So that's kind of nice, to be honest. The first 75 books that RP Comics, which is the comic company that my wife and I started in 2015, the first 75 books that we did, being locally printed and locally distributed, regionally distributed, it's a lot of monkeying around, and it was just myself, Lori, and Tristan Damone. So, it becomes harder for production, like where you're writing your books and you're making your books, and all of the management aspect of if these are anthologies that people are in, we want to have copies to them, and we have copies to those people, and we want to make sure we pay for the production cost, and then we may have to make sure that we've allocated stuff to local retailers in the region, and that they've got a replenishment of it. It's so much nonsense. Whereas now it's on Amazon, people are interested to get it, there they can get it. So that's kind of nice. And we put out 2 last year. So next week will be the official launch of One Page number 2, and so we're going to start doing a whole bunch of promo for that on Monday. I got a copy in. I'm happy with it all. And it just keeps things ticking along. But by comparison, yes, Jim, I appreciate your question. I am glad that I switched over. If you're going to get into all those corporate antics about, well, Amazon, blah, 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 I don't care. I don't care. This is the way the world works. So yeah, so let's get back to it. There's more questions. M. Young has asked if I'm done yet. Yes, I am. It's finished. There you go. There's the finish page. So here we are. So we've got our background pages put in, and then we've got our background panels put in, and the panel that sits in the foreground is that we've got those detail elements in the foreground here. So now we can allow that to facilitate our story development as we draw it in. So underneath where these people are standing, and the nice thing about being able to do this on this layer is that I can raise them up a little bit and shift them over. So they're not covering that second panel character's face so much. And M. Young says, now can you draw Jacques cleaning fire paw? Not in this page. Well, I'll be doing it on its own page. We'll be doing it for its own one-page story. We've already got something we're working on here. Thank you, by the way, for the contribution, M. Young. It's just, we're doing one thing here. We'll do that one. We'll let it have its own thing, right? Its own one-page story. Okay, so here we've got a little explosion and things are going on. So in order to enhance the explosion aspect to this, why don't we break up this image a little bit, so that what we'll do is we'll just use there's a marquee tool that are set along the side of Photoshop, and you can go from squares and circles and so forth. So what we'll do is we'll just utilize that and put in a circle, right? And we'll build that up, and then we can come in and take it outside the panel, because we don't need it. Am I on layer 6 for that? Yeah, yes, I am. So let's just do that again. I'm on its own layer. So now when I come in and I delete it out, there it goes. So it's not going to affect what's happening on our panel here. So there we go. We got our circular quadrant that's put in place, and we can really monkey around with it. So here's our characters now that we can put behind this, and it gets a sense of, oh, they've got something blocking in front of them. So and that's on its own layer as well. So take our note layer off, so that's a little less confusing. Yeah. So what we've got next is to draw these two characters and how they're responding to the explosion. So first and foremost, what I'm going to do is I'm going to move this over like so, okay, and then I'm going to draw our two characters that are getting, these two that are getting blown back now. And there we are, we're on 7. So what I'm going to do is that I'm just going to roughly, from my little note here, oh, I see what I've done. Still got the marching ants on there. So I'll just put these guys in, and the one person is putting up some kind of shield beam thing there, like this, oh, force field, because this is a little sci-fi bank story. And so what I'm going to do is I'm also going to be cheeky and draw them over the panel, the next panel that's going to be underneath. And we'll develop that a little further in a moment. But let's get their hands here, and then the other person will be behind them. So that this one person is safeguarding the second one. So, you know, we've got a female character here and a male character there, and it's just the two of them in this next panel as well. So that gets me to the opportunity to draw both of them together. I think my notion was in my notes for laying this page out is that she's the smart one and he's the physical one. So we're going to play with that a little bit. So the reason that I moved these characters over here, now initially this was the only note for this part of the page. This was this long, broad panel, and on said panel was text that just says, boom. So that they themselves are getting hit by this explosion. And with boom is going to be explosion reaching out towards them. So, and you can see a little more readily if I move the blue characters off the panel above the panel. So what I think I need though is right here inside of, so what I'll do is this. I've made my space the same as it is up above. Now what I should do is put another panel in there, right? Another divider in there, little panel break, so that now we've got what we've put in here is 1. So we've got 1, 2, an overlapping third. So we'll go 1, pen, 5. This is panel 1. This is panel 2. This would be panel 3. This is now panel 4. Here's panel 5. And then the bottom panel is panel 6. So it's a 6-panel page, right? But what we should do is, if we're going to have this person setting off the explosions, you know, one of the things that we can add a little more dramatic tension to the page would be for us to say, you know, that what if they react and go, oh, no, you know, like he set the bomb off too soon, and that's what leads to them blowing back through the air. So let's do a panel a quick sketch now that's not in my initial notes of our two characters responding to the explosion. And that will give us a little more something to add to our page. So we can just have the first character, and we'll raise their shoulder up so that our shot is on a nice angle, right? So this arm, this would go like so. We don't have to continue that on, I'm just showing. And then the second character behind them, so now we've allocated where they are in space in relationship to what's going to happen in the next panel. So this character that was going on the escalator, who's on the right side in panel 1, this one is behind this person. And what's going to happen to them is in response to what this one does with his explosion. So I'm going to draw them in behind. And I tend to find that having response, like having physical engagement with things like hands and faces, those expressive elements in our body, I think that tends to add, it's one thing to be shocked. Oh no, right? And you've got, so that in your shock, you know, you've got this sort of a, oh no expression on your face. But it's another thing when you have somebody going, oh no, and they've got their hand up. So, oh no, this is a thing that we'll do when we're instinctively trying to defend ourselves from something bad happening. So that's why the raised hand in that panel. So, and you know, maybe he's got a raised hand as well. It's just off panel so that we can't see it. Okay, so that takes us down to the final panel for our layout, and that is the two of them really getting flung through the air. And then we can even be cheeky and add one more panel with our third character going, guys, you know, because he doesn't, you know, it's only where he's realizing now that the two characters that he's working with, you know, he's going to have to do something like, dudes, hello, are you okay? Because he's lost contact with them because he set off the explosives too quick. They've gone flying through the air. So we might need to add one more panel. So that'll be 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 panels. But let's take a look first. So if we focus on, make sure we're on the pen. So if we focus on the two of them flying through the air, the reason that I've left the drawings from the panels up above leaking into this lower panel is because we can change the scale size of the panels that we're using. So maybe we want to reduce down the size of the lower panel and you know, lengthen the height of the middle panel, right? The middle panels. Okay, so if we've got our characters who are, because of said explosion, flying through the air, you know, yes, Corbin. Corbin's joining me in the studio. That's fun. Corbin is my studio cat for those that do not know. So here goes our first character as he's getting kicked back. And so what we can do here is we can have his arm going over, trying to cover his face, right? And then the second person behind them who had their hand on the shoulder, you know, as they're directly behind them. So we can have that character who is also getting blown back, but we'll have them, you know, gesticulatively different in how they're expressing themselves. And at the same time, we'll have them physically getting thrown through the space in their own unique way, so that there's a clear understanding of, you know, the two of them having a rough go. Okay, so I'm going to go back. So looking at this now, okay, and so here we'll have all of the smoke and whatnot coming towards them. All right, and we'll add this in a moment. But so looking at the breakdown now, because I drew this out initially in a portrait format, and in drawing this in a portrait format, To put it in what is now the landscape format, portrait goes 11 by 17, and landscape goes 17 by 11. Okay, so that's width by height. 11 by 17 is a normal size comic page, and then 17 by 11 is a landscape size comic page, which is what I predominantly work in, which is what all of these things are, right? That we've done this week already. So, but now looking at, as we're reorienting our page, it makes me realize that we want to adjust the size of our panels a little bit. So I'm going to go all the way back to our borders, way back when. Okay. And what I'm going to do is that I'm going to adjust our borders down so that it's closer in size. The two panels are closer in size to one another. And there we go. Okay, so by doing that, trying to think of where I put, there it is. So by doing that, it's allowing me to take a look at, reevaluate the size of some of the characters and how they're engaging with each other in the overall scene on the page. And, there's benefits to that, right? So what I'll do now is layer by layer, I'm going to come in. So we'll start with 10. Let's move this up a little bit. So so these two are popping right out of the panel. Okay? And so there we go. So we've got them here. We'll pull them down just a little bit as well. There we go. So now the smoke and whatnot is billowing out of this panel. Okay, so we're good with that. Now this panel, we're going to clean up the bottom a bit to contain it within the space of the panel itself. We'll come through here and we'll cut it off at the edge of its panel there. So that's nice and tight now. Okay, so we're good with that. Now we'll go to, there's our boom shape. And let's just make sure that our boom shape stays inside that environment. Okay, so that's good. Now we've got our two people with the force field and the explosion. So we've got two choices. We can either reduce them down in size, which is one option, right? Or we can, so here's one option, okay? So we can scale them down in size to fit in this panel a little more and only peek outside of the panel just a little bit. That's one thing that we can do. I kind of like that, but we have to check against it though, is do these things interconnect and overlap? We don't want that, so we'll go over to 10 and just shift it over a little bit more. So these guys aren't crossing over this person in the lower panel popping out, and at the same time the lower panel popping out isn't crossing over them. When will I do Firepaw getting cleaned up by Jax? Well, I'll add it to the book. It'll be next Friday or Monday, we'll say. I'm not actually going to draw probably specifically Firepaw and Jax because A, I'm old and don't know who they are, and B, I don't do licensed characters. But we'll figure out something. We'll figure something out. That's the challenge of a lot of people with suggestions, is that the first association that we all have is licensed characters. Oh, do this licensed character. And the challenge is that if you draw licensed characters, you don't own that license, so you can't reproduce those, or you can't make those, formally present those to other people. You shouldn't be. A lot of people do fan art, but in a world of the litigiousness that we live in, they can be interfered with by the parent companies that own those characters. And some of those characters are some of those companies are very litigious. So that's the challenge of doing licensed characters. But we'll figure something out. But yeah. Okay, so we've got our panels. Let's take this one back. Let's take this back. We'll just leave the boom there for a minute. Now we've got our panel 6, which is these characters sitting over top. I'm good with them and where they are. So now we're on to our panel 4. So we'll just clean this up by getting all of these extraneous lines out from around it. Here we go. So we'll take these extra lines here out and across the top out. So it just makes it a little more clear to understand about where things are in relationship to one another. Let's come in here and take that border edge out. So I think we're pretty straightforward there now. Yeah. So what is this on? 8? Yeah, let's take that out. Okay, so here's our rough layout now. So except for 6, take the base out. Well, let me put the base back in again so I can show you just for a sec. So except for the 6th layer, which is the one that's over top, and except for our border layer, we can put everybody on one flat layer now. Let's get my name out of there. So now we've reduced all these different layers we've got on here, and we're pretty well set up to go for doing our finished drawings over top of that. And in that way, it lets us further explore how we're going to go about with our story. I think I'd move these people up just a little bit more, just because, just makes a little more sense for that. It allows a little more space for the explosion in this second panel down. But there we go. So we've got some things happening here, and looking at this now, I think I might want to reduce these two down just a little bit more as I'm thinking about the flow. See, that makes a little more sense. There's a little better spacing from the panel below. Nice, more clear separation between that 1, 2, 3, 4, 5th panel and the 6th panel below it. So all we have left now to do, now that we've got all of this stuff laid in, is that last panel idea. So what we'll do is we'll drop, okay, that's a new one. So I've put another border divider in here, little panel division there, and we'll just clean this up a little bit. So we're going to do one more final panel, and on said final panel, we'll have this second character, right, that we have up in, or I'm sorry, the third character, this one. Why is oh, I know why. So this person right here, who set off the explosion and blew his friends hither and yon, this is where we're going to have him check back in and say, guys, dudes, so we can have him, he's got his big zapper in his arm here, and we'll have his second where he's holding his ear, and we'll have him at that same position where the wall is. And you can add in elements like cough cough as he's if we feel fit, and when we put that through in the dialogue. But the rest of this space will be all smoke, right? And so when we add the smoke in, we can really go overboard with this, so that it's now, his explosion has even covered him in smoke. But he gets to say, guys, and there's our resolve for our first page. So here are these three people have gone to steal whatever we decide, the ruby of Kunkunda, whatever we decide to have them going to steal. But in the course of that, they get blown up by their cohort. So just makes it a little more fun and clear for us as we're going about designing our page to not have to overly think about too many of these different elements, right? So we'll reduce this all down to one layer now. Oh, you know what? I'll do one more thing before I do that. So if this is our layer underneath those three people that are imposed over top of it, just for clarity's sake, I'll just take out those lines from those other panels that are behind them. Yeah, sounds good, Chris. Okay, great. So there we go. So now we've got everything down on this one layer, and we'll put our border over top of it. So there we go. What was this one? Oh, it's just the arrow. So there we are. There's our rough. So we can title it rough. And so if we put another layer over top of that, that's where we can start drawing our more finished breakdowns of our page. We can do things like putting the big boom in text, and we can do things like putting that smoke in, or focusing ourselves on drawing the environment behind our characters first. In a way that we can do that is, one of the things that I'll do is I'll sit down, now that I've got all my panels figured out, and I'll put a really light layer in behind so that, I know what the page shape is going to be. I know, and I'll take out the spaces between panels. But this helps me think about the environments as I'm drawing them in. And having this little shortcut in place, I could have done this with a ruler, but I don't know, for whatever reason I felt compelled to do it with the eraser. Having the separation of these panels in place sort of gives me a sense of, the backgrounds that I need to put into these images, and where the effects are going to be in said images. Like, where's the smoke going to run to? Is the smoke going to go, across panels or not, or things like that. So I'll often do that, where I'll sit down and I'll put in, a flat color for the background, and that just enables me to, to have that already set up in front of me, so that I don't overthink it too much, right? So there's that layer, and I can get rid of it. It's just a rough layer, it doesn't matter, right? But having it underneath our rough layer lets me now, below the rough layer, put in smoke effects and things like that. So let's make some decisions. If I'm going to do picking a color for the smoke effect, there's a fun one. So I've got all kinds of different things that I keep kicking around for myself, little effects and things like that. And smoke is one of them. And I have a whole bunch of different kinds of just smoke shapes. And so what that affords me is to not, have to overly think out, how am I gonna make this seem smoky, or what's that smoke gonna look like? I can just do something, so I've got a new layer here. So I've put this smoke pattern in to place. Now, I can switch that around. I can change the shape and direction of it. I can just play with that in general and see what that gives me. I kind of like this, right? I'm gonna probably thicken it up. There, we'll level it up. I'll just compress these two things onto one. And then I'm going to trim it into my own drawing. So what I'll do with that is that we know that he's hiding behind a wall here, and we don't want it to come that far yet. So we'll take that out of there. We know it's going to stay within the confines of our panel, so we'll chop it up there. So here we have the smoky room that this person is running out of now. Hi, Susanna, how you doing? All right, so there's, we can test and see what it would look like if it's even thicker. Ah, it's too thick. Yeah, we'll take that out. So there's our first smoke effect. Now, if I want to apply that again in the next panel, well, why don't we explore this a little bit? So we've got our big boom that's going to be in the background. And do we want it to be that dark, or do we want it to be a lighter gray? Susanna says, keep going. So yeah, we've just got, I've just taken a rough little quick sketch in my thumbnail book for pages, and we're just breaking down a page from that and seeing what that gives us. So here's our big explosive cloud coming in, and we'll do the same thing. We're going to trim that back so that it's within the panel. Keep that separated from the panel up above it. So now we've got this big explosive element. And, oops, I'm sorry. And we'll stretch that out a little bit. I'm going to take the eraser and I'm going to cut down its opacity, scale it up a little bit, and I'm going to trim out some of the edge of that. Just trim it down a little bit. All right, let's see what it looks like now. Yeah, that's all right. Let's do the same thing we did before. Flatten that out to one little level. And then we can put this on our previous smoke layer. So now we've got that all happening in one spot. And we can still see it contained within our drawing. So, underneath the rough is what I meant by that, I'm sorry. So let's pull that back a little bit, make it match the panel. So there, so now we've got that second part of the explosion. Another thing that we can do is take this and copy it, and just to add a little bit of enhancement to it. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to put this within the same shape, but then I'm going to put some white in there, and then we're going to do a little bit of a stroke effect to it and see what that does for us. Yeah, see, it's giving us a little more form to the cloud. Let's put that underneath and see if that's that stuff. No, we'll put it on top again. See, I like that better. That's a prettier cloud to me. So we'll just compress this down again. So it's, putting these effects in first sort of starts to define, what we want to sit over top of our environment. And so I'll be doing the visual images for the environment, in each of these panels as well. And we know that the shape of the panels because of this layer that we put in. But right now I'm just immediately figuring out this explosive part because it becomes such a prevailing part of the entire composition that I want to really make sure that I really explore that and play with that a little bit first and foremost. So now we're going to try, let's see what other cloud, whatchamacallits I got going here. Yeah, here's a fun one. So we'll put a new layer on top of the one that we've been working on. And there we go. So we'll stretch this across. See, I like the way that it filters out to the left. And then we're going to take our tool here and we're going to cut it back into its panel. Get it back in your panel. And clean it up just a tad so that everything is where we want it to be. And then, of course, the debate is, do we double this panel up and then add that white stroke to it? Yeah, see, that makes it a little more exciting and interesting there. One of the things that we can do is we can lay that smoky part over top of what will be, so that's why the characters have disappeared there, okay? And we can lay that additional smoky layer over top of our characters and then just pull it back a tiny bit so that our characters appear in the smoke now. So that's kind of fun. There we go. So this is the way my head works as I'm coloring panels. And oh, we've got one more smoky bit of business here, and that's this last panel. So where the fella that blew up his friends is saying, "Oh, guys, hello." Oh, I did that in white. I did that the wrong thing. Here we are. So we'll put this silly person. Actually, you know what? Let's change the tone of this, and we'll make it darker, just a little darker. And so we'll reduce this down to that panel size where he's now in a dust bowl having set off the explosion. And we'll make a little duplicate one like we did earlier that will go up with the 5 one. And that can overlap our characters so that our characters look like they're embedded in the smoke now. So what I'll do is that I'll cut these all out of the way, compress our smoke onto the smoke beneath the characters onto one plane, and the smoke that will be above our characters is onto another plane, or layer, I'm sorry, I guess would be more easy to understand. And there we go. So we've got the smoke effect laid in throughout our page so that that's all set to go. So that as we go about, and I'm going to do something fun for a second here. So as we go about and we're coloring in, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to use a blue palette for the hallway, okay? So as we're coloring in the panels, okay, so you can see how tonally we're going to shift and adjust things. But because we've got all of these, I'm just differentiating the panels. So now when we put, so you can see our rough lines are still over top, so we know where we still have to do our finished drawings. But now you can see the differences between, I think I've got one more to do. Yeah, just this one here. So now you can see the differences of where the smoke is, and how that works into our environments and where it isn't, right? And we'll figure this out a little more as we go, change some of those background values, but it's sort of giving us a sense of where things are going. Yeah, there we go. So that cleans that up a little bit. So this tells us now about what we have to do for our finished lines. And so I've already got a layer above our rough layer to do our drawing of our characters, our coloring in of our characters. And, there's a couple ways we can do that. I'm going to show you a fast, dirty way that needs to be refined still. But this is similar to when I was showing you Flight School, when I was drawing this page that I'd started last Friday. One of the things that I did with this was that I laid the each of these illustrations on in just the yellow marker. I just drew the silhouette of what I intended to be in the panel. And then I went through with the orange pen and I pulled out the details over top of the yellow marker. And it was after I had pulled out the details with the orange pen that I went in with the ochre marker and I put in some contrasts. So what I'm looking at here is a similar kind of thing. And I'm going to pick it's like a flat Caucasian flesh tone for this, just to pull our characters off. And so I've got this, let me look up the name of it for you. The lasso tool. And so what I'm doing is that I'm pulling out these foreground characters, and I'm just throwing them together. So in my rough layer, and I'm going to put this color layer just underneath my rough. So now you can see our characters are popping off the background, and it gives us a more clear and easy to understand sense of where people are. I'm going to take our color down in the background just for a second so that I can come in with our lasso layer and pull out our characters that are sitting over top. Unfortunately, the color that I used for drawing our characters in is way too close to the color that is in our background there. So I just have to push that back for a second. Okay, and so we'll just drop that in on this same layer. So now when I put that value in, you can still see these people popping out. So these are these silly little things that I'll do in order to inform myself as I'm coloring the page, or as in this case still drawing the page digitally, because we're doing this entirely digital today. So this informs me of where things are in relationship to each other. Like I've got our guy running out of the smoke here, right? So I want to put him separately from the smoke that's in the background. And even though I'm going to put the same color for that smoke in the background, I've got him on one layer and the smoke on another, so that I can, be a little more clear about that as I go along. But we've still made some sense out of how these things work in relationship. Whoops. Please don't put, oh, thank goodness. All right, so I thought I was about to color fill the entire page with the mistake I just made there. So I'm just doing the same, just doing this rough fill in of these characters. So now as I sit down and I draw nicer ways of them, little nicer depictions of these characters, I can really see where they're sort of standing in relationship to the background and stuff like that. Oops. So I'm just, again, lassoing around where that figure is and where this figure is. And these are the two figures that are embedded in the smoke. So they're going to seem milky compared to the others. Now I'm going to move this for a second so I can see where this character is. So here's our guy with his zapper. Put him on that layer, and here's the space behind him. Whoops, let's do this. Behind the smoke. there. So we'll throw that in like that. And then we'll put everything back in. So here's a rough idea of the breakdowns of our page. Robert Doan says, "Stop the press, I am here." So all of this, this way of thinking that I do as I'm digitally drawing, so that I end up eventually with images like this one, is that I'm drawing and I figure out these different planes and how one thing overlays over top of another, is that I'll sketch it all out in this way. And none of these elements really that you're seeing, except for maybe the smoke, are going to stay there for the finished page. And and my reasoning for going about it this way, and everybody has their own methods for going about how they put together their digital drawing. Some people just draw straight. This is just the sketching out process. This isn't the finished inking. I tend to get really, really bored inking over my own drawings. I there's some great things to be said for inkers embellishing the image and adding all kinds of beautiful textures and things like that to them when they're doing the inking separate from when they're doing the drawing. But I'm ADHD. I can't focus that long. so this is all of the rough preparatory stuff laid out for me now. And what I will do at this point is just draw the whole thing on straight. And so this will be, this will be its end result, is taking this basic template that started as a quick panel sketch, like a quick, this one right here, this quick little rough layout in one of my sketchbooks. And we've switched it from a portrait format to a landscape format. And then, we've gone and laid it all out compositionally for ourselves, and relationship of scale for characters and angles in our panels and all of those extra little thoughts that we've made. So, and we've got a pretty good assessment of where everybody is, and we're trying to portray some of that dramatic tension of people holding their hands up in front of their faces. The big exploding cloud is coming towards them, or somebody putting his hand to his earpiece saying, "Guys, where'd you go?" Because he accidentally, knocked his friends over with his little explosion to open up the safe or whatever. And so those little things are all assembled now. Those little choices that I'm making about where I'm breaking panels, like how the character in the bottom, and I'll put a note panel up here just to make it easier. So the character in this, give me a sec. So this knee and this elbow are sticking over the other panels down at the bottom of the page. These characters here are embossed out from the panels that are beneath them, so that it just, because it really works out, these are the three people doing the heist. And the reason I put this in is because, this person and this person are in one place, this person's in another, and because of what he does in this panel, he, these two friends that are here again get thrown back through the air, knocked over, and he sits here at the end going, "Dudes, where'd you go? I got the safe open." Story is when I talk about storytelling and I talk about one page stories, there's a lot more we can do with this. We can do another page, and we can do an entire adventure. We can fill this out into a larger book if we felt compelled to do so. But sometimes story is just about exploring a moment. And in this case, I'm introducing characters. I'm introducing the context of the scene by, here these three are trying to break into this vault. They're coming up to join the guy that's stayed there overnight, let's say, and secretly snuck out of his hidey hole to set charges on the safe. And when he blows up the safe, he takes out the security guard, but he also accidentally takes out his friend and is left there going, something's gone wrong at the end of it. So there's a part of our story. If we were to do a larger, longer narrative, you can have all the stuff that leads up to it. Do your best impersonation of David Mamet, how wonderfully he writes stories like this. And then you've got this little tiny parcel of time. We're here, we're ready to get in there. Boom. Hey, yeah, I got us in there. And he's, in the course of doing so, he's made a big error. And then everything that comes after that. But what we can play with by focusing on a moment of time and focusing on not the entire elaborate narrative, but focusing on this moment of time, we still want to get little nuggets in there. And it's the beautiful part of fusing text and pictures together, words and pictures, is that in the text, we can talk about, this is the person who has the plan. This is the person who can do all the things that needs to be done. And this is his brother who is, brought along with him, even though he's often calamitous. And by establishing that precedent in our narrative, whether it's the two characters in the first panel talking as they're going up an escalator, your brother's not going to make, your brother's not going to goof this up, is he? No, I'm telling you, it's going to work out fine. Everything's going to go well. Okay, we're here, and then we talk about the three characters, and then the brother blows up the room. Our two principal characters get knocked back, and inevitably, the third character, that the younger brother, has done exactly what was laid out in our first panel. He's, made a big mess up of the entire situation. So we're in exploring that one scene and not focusing so much on the larger narrative before, but encapsulating a key component of that into our page saves us from having to do all this stuff if we were to try to justify it. And while we could continue it on for what the outcome of this is going to be and how the entirety of the caper is going to proceed, there's a summation by the end of our page that we're focusing on in the moment here. I hope he doesn't mess it up. Boom. Wah. He messed it up. So while we're not elaborating on the larger narrative that we could in the whole world, the whole idea with doing stuff in a one-page story is it forces me to find a key element in the course of narrative, in the course of a larger narrative, a key element to just focus on in that, and to apply tension if it's a tense scenario, or imply characterization as best I can in that limited amount of space, and imply whatever action in said limited amount of space. We got one page, and so that's why I enjoy doing one pages a lot. Is that because, like I said, with the focus problem about inking my own drawings, which is why you see me draw, like this, where I'm drawing in marker, or I'm drawing in ballpoint pen, or I'm just drawing in colored pencil, and there we go, good to go. The reason that I do those things is that it saves me having to do that additional step, and that takes X amount of time of drawing so that you feel comfortable in drawing whatever medium, right? But it's the same for story. I'm as transient about jumping from one story to the next as I am about the lack of drive to ink my own pencils and to go on and go on and on. So the beautiful thing about digital is that we can do, and by drawing specifically in digital over a really loose rough like this, is that we can do so much for embellishments and things like that in the drawing process digitally, like with putting in smoke, or in the page I was that'll be shown tomorrow. I'm just showing in the first panel, but in this page of putting these granulative approaches to defining the leaves on the trees, or the washed out color in the background so that you can't quite clearly make out the I had the word for it, the oasis like location that the characters have found and gone, let's see, what's this? I had a scribble from the next panel. Woohoo! It's beautiful. We're going to camp here, And so, but because I'm drawing digitally, I can put all these details and effects in right there. And so I really enjoy that aspect. Now, the Photoshop program that I'm using is from 2009. So it's a few years old, but it works for me, and I'm comfortable with it. And I really don't. I'm really not a fan of the idea of paying X amount of money to Photoshop for the programs. Now, bearing in mind, there's all kinds of extra features and things like that. But I recognize how expensive something like that can be. There's all kinds of alternative drawing programs that emulate or very similar to, Photoshop, that are available for free online. Trying to think of the name of one. I can't quite think of anything off the top of my head, but if you look that up, free drawing programs similar to Photoshop on whatever digital device, I'm sure you might be able to find something there. Oh, Robert, thank you so much. Robert says Sketchbook Pro and Affinity Photo, both are one-time buys. Oh, that's great. Good to know. Thank you, Robert. I appreciate that. Yeah, so that's, there we go, Sketchbook Pro and Affinity Photo. Now, Robert, who's in the chat today, is a very accomplished inker, and I highly recommend you go and take a look at Robert's, look up Robert's name and look up his pages and social media. And because Robert does some lovely work. And so there's an instance of what I've been trying to talk about, is that you can do some really interesting embellishing of your line work while you're inking. And I think, Robert, you'd be able to speak to that well. So this is the whole thing roughed in and laid out. And all it is for me now is to sit down and to do the digital drawing part. And to have an end result. But even in doing the digital drawing part, like I showed earlier, here I am drawing it in blue, but there's a part of me that still goes. So I made a transparency of this drawing in black. So what would it look like if I added all this black to it? And then, there's a real sense of, scary, scary in this central area. Do I need it to be that intense? Well, I made a transparency that's not as opaque. Well, that's interesting there. Or this way it lets me look at, what if I just have it as black and white line art? What does that afford me? And does that afford me to then have the ability, and like I showed earlier, and I'll do this for argument's sake. So this is, because it's a transparency, I can put a layer beneath it and apply color. And then I can hand set color and do separations. Honestly, I think it kind of flattens it out, but and I actually prefer the blue. So, but I drew this in blue. And so I would just take the same blue value and I would shift up and down the scale of the blue value for its contrast, its shades and tints. And that's how I drew this, but if I need to replicate those values as I'm furthering on the illustration of this page, I just go over with the color dropper tool in Photoshop. I'm not sure if it's still that today, or if it is in whatever program people are using, but I do the one that picks up a color that we've already used on our page, and we set our paintbrush to that and go back to the paintbrush and start going on in that color. So it's, it lets us further on this approach. And, that's kind of nice. But it's, again, it's with anything else, even if, oh, I got this digital thing and I can just go now, it takes, this time to develop that in whatever way you need to develop that. So allow yourselves that. Allow yourselves to, if you're getting it at this stage of the roughs part, and hey, there's good feelings, I got it all roughed out, the idea that was in my head. Good. If that's good for you, then nobody says that you have to take it on to its finished thing. You're exploring story and you're exploring developing that craft, and as we all are, right? And so sometimes we don't have to complete projects. At the end of last year on Patreon, I put up 21 pages that I laid out as entire rough with the story, and I just stuck them on my Patreon in that shape, which is how, I'd finished 342 completed one-page stories or pages, and then 21 additional rough pages for last year. And, it's just how it worked out. Not quite 365, but there we go. And the year before that, I only hit 358, so who cares? And even however many pages we produce in a year, there's no requirement to that. There's no requirement to any expectation from anybody else, or there's no competition from one person to the next. It's just about, what facility you have for exploring in and of yourself. And allow yourself that. Allow yourself to, if you want to set objective goals. I talked about this previously, about sometimes objective goals are actually weighted albatrosses hanging around your neck, dragging you down and keeping you from just being able to reach for that goal. So if that doesn't work for you, don't do it. But if it does work for you, and say, well, this year I think I want to draw 100 pages. That's a lot of pages. This year I want to draw a 30-page story. That's a lot of pages still, right? I want to draw a 10-page story. That to somebody is a lot of pages, and so on. And that number can keep graduating down. It's so allow yourself to be comfortable in whatever objective you set for yourself. And don't, this year I'm doing 1,000. I know of one person that has drawn 1,000 pages in a year, and that person was Jack Kirby. And that includes interior pages and covers of books in the early days of Marvel. And even still, he's penciling those pages. He's not doing all the inking and coloring and everything else. So, but still, he drew that many pages. But Jack Kirby was a rarity, and there's the reason he's produced so many wonderful things that people are still enjoying today. So, because of his rarity and because of his ability to just walk up and tap into the superflow and just immediately start working on a page. But he found mechanisms and he found ways and means for him to go about taking what's inside of there and putting it down on the surface. And it's just about what works for you. So yeah, this was fun laying this all out today. So what I'm going to have to do now is sit down and pencil it out, or digitally draw it out on top of my roughs, and and then of course put the text on and have it posted this week. So it's going to take X amount of time, an hour or two, and probably 3, let's be honest, and which is time I don't have now because we've got some of our grandkids staying over tonight, having dinner and etc. So we're in a good spot here for how far we got, and I'm pretty pleased with how far we got today. If we take away everything else, we started with a quick sketch of our page idea, and adding in all those elements and laying out how everything works together, and where our panels are going to be and things like that. this is a great place to leave off at. Before any of the coloring stuff, before any separating of what panels on top of what other panel and things like that, we've got a rough understanding of this now. And I would suggest that for most of us, this is a really great practice to do on a regular basis, myself included, because it helps us to really firmly grasp page layouts and breakdowns and stuff. And sometimes it allows those empathetic moments that kick in where you realize, oh, I can have this breaking out of this, and therefore, by breaking out of that panel wall, it shows that it's a dramatic moment where things aren't even staying stable within the confines of this frame of reference. So that's what is going on in the bottom panel here. Or by having these characters free floating in front of other existing panels, it's like it's giving them their own definable panel, but not. And it's sort of utilizing another tool. And that's one of those sort of devices that when I talked recently about Wally Wood and talked about some of his 22 panels, that's one of the examples that are in there. So there's a whole bunch of different things that we can do in order to find ourselves developing our storytelling capability. And if we only ever get so far as to one aspect of it, as long as we're allowing ourselves that, and as long as we feel that there's a sense of growth and stuff like that, there's no reason that somebody can't sit down and draw 200 pages that look like this. And maybe 25 of those pages is reworking some of the elements that are just in that one. So, that's their course of expression for a while, as they're feeling more and more a refinement of, their visual aesthetic and how they develop that. So don't beat yourself up and don't pressure yourself unnecessarily, is what I'm saying. So, okay, I think that's going to be about it for me today. Thanks everybody for coming and hanging out and chatting. I hope that this was fun and interesting, and I know that we've changed up a lot of things in the studio with our sound and our lights and getting things working here, and I hope that that's making it a little bit easier for folks. And our cameras are better, so there we go. We're working on it. So yeah. Oh, Robert says it's much better. Thank you, Robert. I appreciate that. So with that in mind, I will be back. Tomorrow is Thursday. I will be back at 2 p.m. EST, Eastern Standard Time, North America. And yeah, if you're available, you're more than welcome to come and hang out. And if you've got any one-page story ideas or suggestions or dialogue or 3 words or whatever it is you'd like to challenge me with, feel free to put it in the comments for this video or in the comments in any of the social media posts. We'll put it in the new book, and we'll do one-page stories of it. Pardon me for that. And today's page is Flight School, based on the suggestion from Linda for her birthday. So the suggestion was Runciman teaching 16-year-olds how to fly spaceships. So there we go. Okay, folks, that's about it for me. Thanks very much for hanging out. I hope you had fun. And yeah, that's about it. Bye for now. Go draw something. Go have some fun. Bye-bye.